It's the year 1947. The sun has set on the British Empire, but no one is quite willing to admit it. On paper, the British are still an imperial force, their colonies stretching across the globe, their navy still the largest in the world. But behind the polished curtains of power, a subtle yet undeniable shift is occurring. It wasn't war that ended the empire. It wasn't a catastrophic defeat at the hands of another great power. No, it was something more insidious. Something that had been growing for decades, perhaps even centuries. Financial collapse. A series of crushing decisions, hidden debts, and forced policies had drained the life from Britain's global empire, leaving it hollowed out from within. Within just 3 years, from 1945 to 1950, the empire that had once ruled the world would disappear almost entirely, not because of a military defeat, but because of a financial system that had been living on borrowed time, and no one could see it coming. The collapse, however, wasn't immediate. It was a slow, creeping failure, one masked by the illusion of strength. But the reality was there, lurking just beneath the surface. For all the bravado of the British Empire in the post-war years, it was already dying, slowly but surely, under the weight of its own debts, its military commitments, and its inability to adapt to a rapidly changing world. Britain's financial system had become a house of cards, propped up by international loans and a fragile balance of trade. And when the time came to pay the piper, the result was inevitable: collapse. It may be hard to imagine, but the same thing is happening now in the United States. And it's happening far faster than most realize. The same pattern, the same sequence of events is playing out today. The illusion of economic strength, the false sense of control over global power, the debt, the unsustainable policies. It's all too familiar. What Britain experienced in the late 1940s is being mirrored in the United States, and the clock is ticking. In just 18 months, the same forces that brought down Britain will bring down America, and it will be just as sudden, just as surprising, and just as irreversible. This may sound far-fetched, even impossible, but if we look closely at history, we can see the signs. And if we look even closer at the present, the same patterns are there, hidden in plain sight. But why is this happening? What are the forces at play, and why does it feel so inevitable? The answer, as always, lies in the system. The system that has allowed America to maintain its position as the world's preeminent superpower. The system that has held up the economy, the military, and the global order for decades. It is a system built on credit, on leverage, on promises that cannot be kept forever. And like all systems built on sand, it is beginning to crumble. The question now is not whether America will collapse. It's when. And more importantly, how. But the full mechanism of this collapse, the steps, the conditions, the hidden patterns that have led us to this point, will be explained in the coming moments. For now, just understand this. The collapse of the United States is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And that when is quickly approaching. The decline of great powers is rarely as sudden as it seems. History has shown that empires, nations, and systems of dominance appear to be thriving right up until the moment they fall. It is the inherent nature of power to give the illusion of unshakable stability, to make its rulers and citizens believe that their position is secure. But, as history reveals, the strongest empires are often those closest to collapse, their strength fueled by unsustainable forces, masked by artifice. And just as the British Empire stood tall in the years following the end of World War II, so too does the United States seem, on the surface, invincible. Its military might is unmatched, its economy appears robust, its global influence unchallenged. However, as with Britain in the years before its empire crumbled, the stability of the United States is a facade. Beneath the surface, the cracks are already visible if you know where to look. The US is propped up by an ever-increasing mountain of debt, both public and private. Its financial system is a carefully constructed web of promises, debt obligations, and speculative risks that have spiraled beyond control. The central banks, the Federal Reserve, have played the role of the magician, pulling money out of thin air to keep the economy afloat. But this magic trick, like all tricks, has its limits. The illusion of stability can only last for so long before reality intervenes. In 1947, Britain was in a similar position. The war had left the country financially broken, its military stretched thin, and its colonies growing restless. The British government made the fateful decision to borrow heavily from the United States in order to maintain its empire. What seemed like a temporary solution, a lifeline, a way to buy time, only delayed the inevitable. Britain's debts grew to unsustainable levels, and the system that had once supported the empire began to buckle under the weight of its own contradictions. The economy was artificially propped up by loans, and the cost of maintaining the empire was draining Britain of its ability to support itself. The British pound was no longer backed by the gold standard, and as inflation soared, the currency lost its purchasing power. The end of the British Empire was not a sudden event, but the result of decades of financial mismanagement, of living beyond its means, and of a refusal to confront the reality that its global dominance was over. Fast forward to the present, and the same forces are at work in the United States. The American economy, like the British economy of the post-war period, is driven by debt. The national debt is a staggering $31 trillion, and the US government continues to borrow more money to fund its deficits. The Federal Reserve has kept interest rates low for years, flooding the market with cheap money. Corporate debt has surged, and the stock market is filled with over-leveraged companies, many of which are operating on the edge of insolvency. The illusion of economic stability is maintained by the constant injection of liquidity into the system, but the fundamental reality is that this is not sustainable. This pattern of borrowing, of living beyond one's means, of masking financial instability with artificial support, is not unique to Britain or the United States. It is a pattern that has repeated itself throughout history. The collapse of the Spanish Empire in the 17th century was fueled by a similar dynamic. Excessive borrowing to fund military campaigns, a failure to adjust to changing economic realities, and a growing disconnect between the empire's military might and its financial power. The same pattern played out in the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century, in the Soviet Union in the 1980s, and now in the United States. In each case, the power structures of these empires seemed unshakable until they suddenly weren't. It is a cruel irony that the strength of a nation can often be the very thing that leads to its downfall. The US military, for example, is one of the most powerful institutions in the world. Its influence stretches across the globe, and its technological advancements are unparalleled. But military power, in the absence of economic stability, becomes a liability. The cost of maintaining the military-industrial complex, of funding endless wars, of supporting foreign bases and interventions, strains the nation's finances to the breaking point. The illusion of strength becomes a trap, one that the US is caught in today. The question is no longer whether America can maintain its global dominance. It is whether it can afford to. The cost of its military commitments, combined with the ballooning debt, has placed the US in a precarious position. The illusion of strength, just like the illusion of stability, is beginning to crack. There is a deeper contra, one that lies between the surface and the reality beneath it. On the surface, the US economy seems to be thriving. Unemployment rates are low, the stock market is performing well, and consumer spending is strong. But beneath the surface, there are warning signs everywhere. The wealth inequality in the United States is at an all-time high, with a growing divide between the rich and the rest of the population. Wages for the majority of Americans have stagnated, while the cost of living continues to rise. The housing market is in a bubble, and student loan debt has reached unsustainable levels. The financial system is built on a house of cards, with financial institutions like banks, insurance companies, and pension funds holding massive amounts of debt. The current situation is a dangerous one because the surface calm hides the true instability beneath. The stock market, for example, is riding high, but much of the growth is driven by speculative investments rather than by solid, long-term economic fundamentals. The US dollar, while still the world's reserve currency, is increasingly at risk as other nations begin to move away from it in trade and investment. The global financial system, which has long been centered on the US, is shifting, and the US is struggling to keep pace. This contrast between the appearance of prosperity and the reality of instability is the hallmark of all great collapses. It is the moment when the empire believes it is at its peak, even as the forces of decline are already at work. But here's the most chilling part. Just like Britain, the United States will not see its collapse coming. There will be no dramatic warning signs, no immediate military defeat. The collapse will come slowly, and then suddenly, in a moment of shocking clarity. When it does come, it will be not because of one specific event, but because of the accumulation of decades of financial mismanagement, of false promises, of living beyond our means. And when it happens, it will be irreversible. The US is living on borrowed time, and in just 18 months, the same financial forces that have brought down every empire throughout history will bring down America. But there's a key difference this time. This collapse is going to feel slow, but when it happens, it will feel sudden. And when it does, we won't have any more time to prepare. In the final years of the British Empire, as the world's largest colonial power faced the inevitable unraveling of its global influence, there was a deep sense of denial among its political leaders. The public still believed in the empire's strength, the majesty of its military, and the unshakable value of its currency. Yet, behind the closed doors of government chambers, there were conversations no one wanted to have. Britain's financial system was on the brink of collapse, but the idea of empire slipping away was too painful to confront. The process of collapse was slow and imperceptible at first. Public optimism remained high, even as the financial strains grew. But in the years that followed, the realization set in. The empire, in its most glorious form, would never return. The United States now finds itself in the same perilous situation. Much like the British Empire at the start of the 20th century, the US is a world power whose strength is anchored in its financial system, its military dominance, and its place at the top of the global order. And just as Britain's collapse wasn't triggered by a single event, but by a slow, internal decline, America's fall will come in much the same way. But make no mistake, the collapse will feel both slow and sudden, all at once. It is often difficult for those inside the system to recognize its impending downfall. The illusion of security, of control, is overwhelming. In the United States today, the economy looks robust. Unemployment rates are low. The stock market is reaching new heights, and government bonds still carry an aura of trust. Yet, just beneath this veneer of prosperity, there are forces at work that are leading the country toward a precipice. The mounting debt, the reliance on cheap credit, the militarization of foreign policy, and the growing social divide are all part of a dangerous recipe for disaster. The collapse of the US will not be due to a single event, nor will it be the result of a sudden crisis. It will be the culmination of years of financial mismanagement, of a refusal to adjust to a rapidly changing global landscape. It will be the result of a failure to adapt to new economic realities, much like how the British Empire's refusal to abandon colonial rule ultimately led to its demise. In the US, there are no easy solutions to the problems at hand. The financial system is too complex, too intertwined with global markets, for any quick fix to restore balance. When the collapse comes, it will be the result of a sudden realization that everything we thought we knew about the US economy, about the global system, was an illusion. As we look toward the near future, 2025, 2026, it becomes clear that the time frame for this collapse is fast approaching. But here's the most chilling part. The collapse won't feel like a sudden explosion. Instead, it will feel slow, almost imperceptible at first. The system will continue to churn along, feeding itself with temporary solutions, patching over the cracks, until one day, the system itself will break. It will happen when least expected, and when it does, there will be no way to stop it. And when that moment comes, we will all be left standing in the rubble, trying to understand how it all came apart. It won't be a violent revolution or a sudden foreign invasion. It will be a quiet collapse, a slow burn that consumes everything. The trigger event will not be what causes the collapse, but what reveals it. It will be a moment, a sudden shock to the system that exposes the true fragility of the structure holding it all together. Whether it is a financial crisis, a geopolitical shock, or a domestic crisis, the result will be the same. A sudden realization that the world we knew is no longer possible. The real question now is who will be ready and who will be caught off guard. Those who have prepared for this inevitable moment will be able to weather the storm. They will have anticipated the collapse, understood the patterns of history, and made the necessary adjustments to survive. But those who have denied the truth, those who have clung to the belief that the system will hold forever, will find themselves scrambling for answers when it's too late. The warning is clear. The collapse is coming, and it's coming sooner than anyone is prepared to admit. But the most important thing to understand is that the trigger event, whatever it may be, will not cause the collapse. It will merely reveal the cracks that have been growing beneath the surface for years. It will be the moment when the illusion of strength fades and the reality of weakness is exposed for all to see. As we stand at the threshold of this great shift, there is one final warning. Do not wait until it's too late. Prepare for what's coming, because when the collapse happens, it will happen quickly. The question is not whether it will happen. It is when and how you will respond. The clock is ticking and the moment is drawing nearer.